Everything is fueled from me wanting to be a better person on earth.
It's time to do your part.
Loyal listeners and viewers, do your part. Still on the road, LA County, yet again. I'm in Venice Beach, joined with Mr. George Robert Fuller. As I tell you with a lot of guests, if you don't know who they are, Google them. But he's going to tell you all about him and much, much more. I've been waiting to sit down and talk with you. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm going to get a little closer,
Okay.
a little more intimate. I'm well. I'm good. You know, again, I've been so excited to have these conversations with you. You've lived like 3 lives in the 40-something years you've been here. How old are you?
43.
I knew that. I wanted them to hear that. But so I just am excited to hear, again, perspective, a bit of your experience, etc. So I always ask my guests, I asked you to do this. Why'd you say yeah?
Why did I say yes? Because I think that it's also important that people get to hear from people from all walks of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Diversity.
And why not?
Yeah, that's part of the problem with just the world in general is that we get too pocketed in our own levels of comfort. And it's like, wait, there's other things out there that can show us newness, right?
Correct.
So tell me a bit about, I know you're from Chicago. I don't know too much about your upbringing, your experience. So I want you to tell myself as well as the viewers a bit about, you know, where you're from and what that was like. And yeah, give us some detail.
Mm-hmm. Well, I come from Chicago, Illinois, Southwest Side, middle class, working middle class neighborhood, single parent household, maternal, single parent. Grew up in the house with my mother and grandmother, so I was fortunate to have 2 parents, so to speak, as opposed to just my mother. I was an only child, her only child. And it was like I said, a middle class working neighborhood. I went to Catholic school pretty much all my life.
Wow. Let me jump in. Catholic school, do a lot of black folks practice Catholicism?
I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know how I can answer that. Probably, I don't know. I don't know if they do, but
right?
I know.
Because think about it. That's interesting.
But a private school education, you know, it's generally Catholic school. I don't know, in the Midwest at least. So when you hear
I think
people
you're right,
say,
Northeast too. Yeah,
exactly. When they say my kids are going to private school, they're normally speaking of a Catholic school.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry. Go on.
So I, like many, had a Catholic school education, and no, I was not Catholic. Although I got a A+ in religion. I grew up in the AME church, which is African Methodist Episcopal.
Wait. So these 2 things weren't conflicting for you? And A, within yourself, or B, within your mom and the school?
No, they didn't care. She wanted me to go to a good school.
Got it. So
and
it wasn't.
They don't have any AME schools, Christian schools.
Right.
So the next best thing is Catholic.
You can see why
school.
One would be interested by that. That's pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
You know?
That's a good question as well.
I mean, Catholic Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends, Episcopalian, you said.
I never thought of it, but yes. And I did used to question it sometimes when I was growing up. I was like, now how do I go to Catholic school? And I would say to my mom or my grandmother, who was really heavy in the religion, AME, she'd say, oh boy, please, you know. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm studying Catholicism, to your point. More of that than I am AME, although I was pretty active in the church as well. Many different facets of the church.
Where are you now with religion?
I'm grateful that I have a religious base, but I tend to think that I'm a bit more spiritual now than religious. Though I think that spirituality comes from a base of religion. I tend to think that religion is a bit judgmental. And a bit, it has a tendency to be ostracizing to people. It ostracizes many. So I don't really subscribe to religion anymore. I believe that a relationship with God should be personal and individual, and it's unique for each of us. You know, I'm a gay man, and I was, you know,
You're gay?
That's something that's condemned.
Right.
Yeah, no, surprise.
I do that with all my gay guests. Go ahead.
Yeah, surprise. So yeah, and religion it speaks against who I am. So I had to learn to love myself in spite of what other people told me. And one of the sayings was, some of the worst folks is the church folks.
Yeah, I still see that floating around on Facebook.
Yeah.
This is a good time for me to circle back. So with that said, and you kind of having this conflict of what the words of the Bible say and conflicting of who you are, how did that translate with you growing up? Like, did you hate yourself? And as far as Catholicism in Catholic school, was this elementary and junior high and high school?
I went in elementary school. I graduated from Catholic school, and high school. I went to Catholic school, then I transferred to an arts
So the
academy,
majority of
then
your
I
school
went back
career.
to high school I graduated from a Catholic high school. Yes.
So the bulk of
majority
it.
of my life.
Okay.
Yes.
So I keep cutting you off, but go ahead. So
okay.
what was that like? Did you have self-loathing growing up?
Self-loathing? No. I've always been pretty unique. So, and being an only child, you learn how to entertain yourself. Mm-hmm. And being a fortunate only child, meaning that I had every toy that every kid ever wanted. So, and bikes and all that stuff. So that made me, even though others might have spoken against me at times, I always had all the shiny things that they wanted. Mm-hmm. So they would befriend me anyway.
And that's value. It is still to this day.
Yeah, I
It's
suppose.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
That's
you have
value. When
stuff
you have
people
shiny,
want.
Yeah, exactly. It draws people to you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a good thing now at the point where I am in life, but
we'll get to that in a minute.
We'll get to that. But,
Yeah. Because you've worked your tail off to get to where you are. Talk about unique. You have a very unique story.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think that going back to self-loathing, no, it wasn't self-loathing. I think other kids, because I was different and unique, had more of a problem with me than I had with myself.
Mm-hmm. What made you unique?
Going back to the question you asked, I mean, just being gay, I think makes you unique. And going back to your original question, which is the word and how I felt, my grandmother sat me down early on in life and said she's been very instrumental in my upbringing, as was I did have a great grandfather. We lived in a family building, so on the first floor, my great grandfather lived, and his wife, who died when I was 2. Then he remarried. So my step grandmother, Christine, and then my grandmother, myself, and my mom lived on the second floor, and then my
So 4 generations? You, your mom, your grandmother, and her father.
Absolutely.
In one home.
building. In one building.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
That's
and
a
there's
show.
Still 5 generations alive.
That's a show.
I agree.
I mean, it'd have to be like a comedy. Maybe Tyler Perry could do something with it. But
I agree.
Wow. Go on.
Yeah. So I grew up in that household. And
do you remember your great-grandfather?
Oh, my God. He didn't die until I was 22 or 3.
And you were close with him?
Very close.
Very rare. Go ahead.
So, in fact, very close. He used to walk me to my first school when I was, a very, 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 like a toddler, called Emmanuel Christian. And there used to be a statue. I remember one of my fondest memories of him is passing the statue. He had on white pants. He was like a jockey and like this blue shirt, and I would call him Mr. Blue. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, I guess the family moved and left and moved the statue. He's like, "Where's Mr. Blue? Where's Mr. Blue?" So it's so funny. I remember that. But yeah, so eventually my grandmother sat me down and explained to me the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in the Old Testament is where it speaks against homosexuality and men being lovers of each other, and how it's not right, basically. But, and this is in the King James version, the KJV version of the Bible. And I remember her saying to me throughout her years of studying the Bible, so Jesus then came back. That was before Christ, the Old Testament was. And then when Jesus died and came back in the New Testament, there's nothing about homosexuality being wrong. So, those who believe that it's wrong generally are talking about what's written in the Old Testament and not what's written in the New Testament after Christ. So they don't necessarily really know what they're speaking of. And so, as my grandmother always says to me, and she's very vocal about it now and wears it with pride.
Yeah, because she would be an Old Testament woman, right?
I think that she's a Bible woman.
Okay, so how
the entire Bible, and
what did she tell you about it?
And that's what she said. She said, grandson, I love you as you are. Of course you wanted me to have a wife and kids, but at the end of the day, she doesn't believe that God condemns me because of my sexuality. And she taught me that, and that's what I believe. And my relationship with God is my relationship with God, and it's different than yours and anyone else's.
And you had that conversation with her at a young age?
I had it probably in around college.
I see. So young enough to where it resonated, but not like in your preteens where it really kind of helped solidify your confidence.
Right. I think in my teens and early age, because I did grow up in the church. My uncle was the minister. He was a pioneering minister in the AME Church, which is the denomination I mentioned earlier. AME, African Methodist Episcopal, is what it stands for.
Are they like, they're not snake people, right? Snake
No.
charming, like that's a branch of Episcopalian. Oh no,
I don't know.
that's okay, sorry, go on. We'll get back to you.
I'm not sure about that.
I'll think about it.
No, basically it's Episcopalian and African. The African Methodists became, because they broke off from Episcopalian because they were black people who were studying the denomination, and because of slavery and what have you, it became AME. That's what that came from. But it is basically the Episcopalian faith or denomination, if you will. But yeah, so for me growing up, I kind of was a loner. I've always been a loner. I know a lot of people. Well, a lot of people have always known me. I've always been, walk to the beat of my own drum. I never really knew a lot of people's names. I still don't. Half the time when I'm talking to people, I don't know who I'm talking to, or I'll just kind of laugh it off and like wait for them to say their name, or wait for somebody in the group to say their name because they expect me to know it, and I just pretend like I do. So, or I'll ask them. I'll say, excuse me, what is your full name? And they'll say their first name, and I'll say, I know your first name, but what's your full name? That's like a little trick I do.
Look out for them, y'all. He's sneaky.
I'm talking to them, speaking with them. So that's pretty. I mean, I just grew up, a loner. I read a lot. I was pretty artistic, and yeah, to myself, which has been it's been a blessing in my life, actually.
Tell me about your high school career and your social life a little bit, because I know you've got some friends that you've known since high school, so you weren't completely a loner. Tell me a bit about that experience for you, and how that led you to where you are today a little bit. I know that's a very broad question, but I know you went to like a very specific high school, an art school for a while, right? So tell me a bit about that, your friends, your social life.
So originally when I entered high school, I went to Brother Rice High School, which in 1991 had they had a black and a white prom. It was a segregated prom. And it was
in Chicago in 91.
It was on Oprah Winfrey Show. It made headline news that in the 90s, there would still be a high school having a segregated prom. I was on Fox News because I was pretty outspoken, and they interviewed students from the school, and I was one of them as a freshman or sophomore. And so I wasn't even going to prom, but my opinion was that here we are in 1991 having a segregated prom. My school was 2% black out of a 12% minority. 2% of those were black.
So then it would have been like 15 of you all at this prom?
Maybe so. I mean, no, I don't even know if there were that many. Maybe 15. And we're talking about 2% of of student body.
Right.
So
talk about it. This was a slap in the face. This was, wasn't like black folks were saying, yeah, we're okay with this too, because we have half of this school, we can still turn up on our own. This is
and it was
being excluded.
It was basically about music. It was music. They did not want to play the music that the black kids wanted to hear at the prom. So the black kids said, that's okay, we'll have our own. And they did. They did. And then they wound up putting it in the school bylaws that we can't have two proms anymore. Because
So
I mean,
that
it
one
did
situation-
make headline news and it shed a lot of light on this school.
Or
So,
got negative light.
exactly.
Sure, none of it was positive. Wow, that's interesting. I couldn't imagine that. My high school career was nothing like that. Go on.
And I mean, I actually, in the end of my sophomore year, I went before the school board. I was pretty smart. I, got really good grades, but I was pretty militant. Like, I spoke out. It was a very segregated, very racist school, and I was different. I had.
So you dealt with racism.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Chicago is probably one of the most racist cities and most segregated cities you'll ever go to, even to date. It still is.
I've felt like I've learned that on my own, and I never knew that until just these past few years. I always thought it was a very progressive, very diverse, blended.
Oh, no. Black people live here. White people live there. Asian people live in this enclave. People who migrate there from other continents, they have their territory. I mean, it's very, where I live is probably a more culturally, there's an area called Hyde Park that's more culturally diverse, which is where the interracial couples would go to live safely.
Okay.
And have their children. And
You said would go. What's this, like the 80s?
this is currently.
Oh, gotcha. So that's where they do go.
Yes,
Got
they've
it.
been going there since I don't know when, because it was a more culturally diverse area. And so where they could live and have their children, and it is what it is, and people know. Where I live in Chicago, I wouldn't say it's culturally diverse. It's younger, and it's more diverse in that respect, and somewhat culturally diverse. But what I found recently is many of the blacks lease there. They don't own. I'm fortunate to own, but many don't. I've realized recently.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's systemic racism.
Just
like-
bam.
That's
Just
what
boom.
it is. They can't afford it. They're priced out. You know, I was fortunate, but again, I work in a business where, and even so, when I moved into my building, it wasn't until they saw me, you know, some of them saw me on television that they realized I wasn't a drug dealer. But that was the word going around as who is this 28-year-old drug dealer. That's how old I was when I bought the place. 28-year-old drug dealer, you know.
And this isn't
fixing
like
up
a
his
high
place.
rise with like beautiful views of the water. Like this is like not just,
No.
you know, an
So he
apartment
couldn't-
somewhere.
Right. He couldn't be an upwardly mobile.
So let's move into what
male.
you do. Let's talk about what you do, how you got to where you are, what you've done, you know, what you want to do. Talk.
Oh, what do you want me to say? I don't really know what to say.
So tell me about your career and like how you got started in your career, because you're known as the Lord of Beauty now, and so a lot of the TV spots that he's referring to are like a lot of news spots, lots of promotional spots, right? A lot of really rich and famous women know you for kind of helping them beautify. Does this sound right?
That is right.
Could I
Correct.
could I do your PR?
You could.
Really?
Absolutely. You're hired if this, you know.
All right, we'll see you later. Have a good
You can
one.
moonlight.
So tell me, because I'm sure you fell into that. Like, I feel like when we spoke earlier, I think I was always led to believe that that's a passion of yours that you always knew you would, you know, find.
You're right.
But it also sounds like from your LA experience that you just kind of were seeing, you know.
Well, I fell into celebrities. As a child, I always played with Barbie dolls. Like, I would hide and play with Barbie dolls. My mom didn't like openly let me play with them. So you know, and my uncle, I had an uncle, my mom's uncle, who's a great uncle of mine. They're 11 years apart. And he was like a male father figure to me. And he has a daughter, two daughters. One is 11 years older than I am. And then my mom's 11 years older than she is. So that's kind of interesting in our family.
Yeah.
Anyway, dynamic. And that's already 3 generations, if you will. But he had a daughter who's closer to age with me. She's 5.5 years older, or 4.5, something like that. Anyway, we're really close, and I used to play with her dolls and stuff. And you know, I always wanted to do hair, and I always wanted to dress, you know, women and do their makeup. And so I would do it with Barbie dolls. When I was younger, I would sneak if I weren't over at my cousin's house, which I spent a lot of time. Like I said, my mother was a single parent. And she worked a lot, and then, you know, went out and stuff. So I spent a lot of time there, and I would play with their dolls, and then I would go home and I would like sneak and buy one, or whoever the neighborhood girls were. They would ask them if I could see their dolls and take them home and like hide and play with them.
But you keep saying hide. Every single step of the way that you had to play with the Barbie, it had to be hidden.
It had to be hidden. My uncle didn't mind me playing with them at his house. He was probably the only one who allowed it and kind of somewhat encouraged it. He didn't care. His thing was, if he wants to play with dolls, let him play with dolls.
So this is interesting, because even then, not that I'm assuming that you should have shame. I think we all have shame. It doesn't matter how good you've had it. But even through all those moments where you're forced to hide who you were, still didn't induce shame, still didn't start to build the blocks of like...
I never hid who I was. I'm fortunate in that I never really hid who I was. It wasn't until probably high school that I started to feel like, well, maybe I should pull back. I mean, I was pretty outspoken anyway, but I thought maybe I should pull back. I had my first real girlfriend in high school, and, you know, all those types of things, heterosexual things that you're supposed to do. But I knew it never felt right, and it wasn't me. So it ended with high school, and I became more myself. I went to an art school in my junior year after I went before the disciplinary board. But my mom came with at this school that was
Disciplinary board. What happened?
Yeah, I'm telling you that I wound up. I'm trying to remember what happened. I think I had a fight.
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Fight.
I don't remember you trying to tell me that. I would remember. Go ahead.
No, I had a fight. We used to do something called a walkathon.
Uh-huh.
And I had a fight. And my grandfather at the time was alive, my mother's father. And he used to tell me stuff. He'd be like, well, grandson, you don't always have to fight with your fists, fight with your words. And, these white boys used to use the N-word like 90 going north when I was in high school, if you will. So my grandfather told me one time, he says, well, when they call you that, you don't have to fight them. Say this. And he said, when they call you a nigger, tell them you'd be one too if your mama had the man she wanted.
Wow.
So that was one of the things my grandfather told me, and I remembered it, and I still retain it to this day. We're talking about 30 years ago. And I said it one day in the hallway, and the hall stopped.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure you got some reaction from that.
Of course I did. Yeah. And he's like, they'll always be looking at their mother to see who she's looking at when they go to the grocery store. So anyway, real funny. But so one time I was on the walkathon. We would do this thing to raise money for charity, and we would do a walkathon. So I was walking on a walkathon, and this guy came, and he's called me a freak. And I beat his ass, literally, and, it was just crazy because we wound up both getting suspended. They weren't going to suspend him, even though he started the fight. But my mom was like, oh, no, you're suspending my son. You better suspend him, too. Yeah. Then we were going to sue the school. So my mom, they called me before the disciplinary board. My mother came up there with an attorney.
Wow.
And they backed down. They were just like, okay. And she was like, we'll make this a public thing. You guys just had a prom last year, black and white, and now you're trying to kick my black son out of school because he defended himself. Right. Because a group of white boys came to jump on him, and then all the black boys came running back because it was just like a fiasco. And so, they had written freak on my locker because in high school I used to wear like the cross color. Remember cross colors?
Of course.
Like the real baggy pants. I used to wear those, and then I had long hair. Like it would
That's
just
what was
be
popping.
right at my collar. But these are Irish Catholic boys from an area in Chicago called Mount Greenwood and Beverly, which is Beverly Hills of Chicago.
Okay. So they're like polo wearing.
Exactly. Ties to school. But some of them were acid tripping. That's what we had to wear as part of our dress code.
Oh, you guys were in uniform?
No uniform, but we had to wear a tie every day.
Wow.
So I would have my tie and my wide leg jeans and my, I was like vintage. I would wear like a vintage.
You were
plaid.
different.
Oh yeah. And my black, I've always worn black eyeglasses. So I had like the Malcolm X looking black glasses and the straight hair and so yeah. And I was one of like in the 2%. So anyway, one of my closest friends, I had three, Darnell, Morocco, and Milo. Milo and I are still very, very close. He lives in, I've told you about him. He lives in, he used to live in Northern California. Anyway, he's like backpacking around the country with his partner now. But at any rate, and then Morocco and Darnell, and we were all close, just the three of us. And we're all still pretty close to this day. So that was my high school years. I went to the Academy for the Arts, which is where I kind of started to come out of my shell. I always wanted to be an actor. Okay. Musical theater.
Because we were talking about beauty, so there's acting in there too.
Well, originally I wanted to do hair as a child. Then I wound up, but because my family didn't encourage that, I wound up saying, okay, what's the next best thing I can do that's close to that, so that they would accept, and that was acting. And or musical theater. So my mom was behind me becoming an actor because she's like, oh, my son will be rich then. You know what I mean? Yeah. So she encouraged that behavior. And I went to the Academy for the Arts. There was no structure there. So she sent me back for my senior year to Brother Rice to graduate. And then I left there and I got accepted. I graduated high school at 16. So I wound up,
I didn't know that.
I turned 17 like a month later. And I went to college at 17, but everybody else was like 18 and 19. So I was the youngest probably on campus.
And 1 year is like 4 years when you're that age.
Exactly. Yeah. So here I was at Howard University in Washington, D.C. at 17, just 17, and everybody could go to the clubs and stuff. So I had to get a fake ID so I can go to the clubs, tracks and all that. And I was there for a year and a half, 2 years. And then I studied theater arts. I was there with Chadwick Boseman, actually. He was in my class.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. And we knew each other.
Remember when we saw him the other day?
We saw him.
Or not the other day. That was like
at the Four Seasons Hotel.
Was that January of this year?
That was December. December of last
Yeah,
year.
and he didn't look well.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
he was
and
with his
you
wife.
And you said too, you're like, there's something.
I said,
wonder
there's
if he's
something
sick.
wrong with him.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's sick.
All right, go
and
on.
I didn't say anything to him, remember?
Yeah,
I
of
was
course.
going to. I
Oh,
was
no,
going
you
to-
could have because you knew him.
Yeah, I could have, but I didn't. I kind of like turned away because I knew something was wrong and I didn't want to get into that with
Yeah.
him.
I heard Malcolm X. Excuse me. I heard Denzel Washington paid for his school career.
Yeah, he paid for. I can't remember what it was, but yes, he was influential at at some point in his academia.
Yeah. Okay, go on.
So I went to Howard and I loved it. And then I wound up getting, because I studied theater and then I studied fashion and journalism. And I just wasn't feeling the vibe of college. You know, my mom had bought me a brand new car and surprised me, and I felt bad. I wanted to work for Oprah Winfrey. I wanted to, I just didn't know. And I wound up, I was always pretty much an A student. And my grades slipped, they started slipping, and I was getting depressed. And I wound up speaking to one of my professors who was just like, I could lose my job for telling you this. And she just went on this long rant about her and what happened in her life. And she wound up working for Essence magazine, which was like the Bible for Black women at one point, when Susan Taylor was running it. And she encouraged me to see the world, to leave college. She did. So I went back home. At the time, my mentor was Oprah Winfrey's makeup artist, Roosevelt Cartwright, and Reggie Wells. And I would go down to like Harpo and hang out and stuff. And I really wanted to intern there. And at the time, Oprah didn't know if she was going to cancel her show or not, or stop back then. I think this was in the mid 90s, because I think there was talk then about her ending her show and going on to act or whatever. But they wound up starting up the internship program. I did not intern. I used to hang out there, but then I wound up getting a job. I wound up leaving one summer, going to hair school, and while I was home for summer school, I started hair school and stuff. And then I wound up, I didn't go back to school. I wound up doing getting this internship at Jerry Springer as a hair, makeup, and wardrobe intern. Okay, that was my very first job.
Jerry. Are you kidding me?
Nope.
I never knew this.
And I'll never forget that this was the start of my career. And I wound up, I'll never forget, I was watching a show one day, and this is why I'll say to people when they ask me, how did you get started? You just have to have a dream and just start.
Yeah, just start doing it. Yeah.
I was watching the Jerry Springer show one day, and I had been frustrated with trying to get Oprah's people to let me come on in and work instead of just hanging out, and I wound up, just back then you could call on the phone, and I called on the phone, and I got a lady named Annette Grundy, who I'm still really good friends with. She was the senior producer of the show, and I watched it, and I said, hey, I do hair, makeup, and I want to do wardrobe. Can I come down there? I would love to work there. And she said, oh my God, the nerve of you. Sure. Can you come down for an interview on Friday? I said, of course.
Did she literally say the nerve of you?
Well, she didn't say that, but I could hear it in her tone of voice. She was just kind of shocked,
Talk about gusto, yeah.
And I mean, because I was adamant about I wasn't going to take no for an answer.
Yeah.
So I literally went down for an interview, put on my suit, got my briefcase. My grandmother took me down to Marshall Fields, bought me a suit. I think a Claiborne suit. I think I still have it to this day in my closet. And I went down for the interview and literally got the job. I started that Monday. She says, can you be down here to start on Monday? I said, sure. So I went down, and I was a hair, makeup, and wardrobe intern for 3 months. I started working with a girl named Kim Cleveland, who became a makeup artist working for me when I started my own business later in life. And I worked there for 3 months, turned 6 months, and then I was offered a job. I didn't take it. I wound up moving to LA. And
so they wanted to keep you, and you said, no, it's time for me. I'm going to follow my gut and go west.
And my friend Annette Grundy wound up moving out here to LA at the same time, her and Kim Cleveland, who I just mentioned, because she was coming out here to be senior producer on the Vibe magazine used to have a television show.
I remember it.
Yes, I forgot who I think Sinbad was the first host, but then after Sinbad, it went to, I think, Chris Spencer or someone else.
Or I thought Flex did.
Not Flex Alexander.
Oh, okay.
Chris Spencer.
Chris Spencer, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, gotcha.
And it wound up getting canceled and stuff, and then she wound up going on to do other stuff. And here I was in LA, and I started working for Shaka Khan. My prior to that, somewhere in the middle of all of this, I went with my mentor, Reggie Wells, who's a famous makeup artist. He's retired now. But at the time, I wound up going with him to New York for the Grammy Awards in 1997.
Wow.
Graduated high school
Like
in
as a guest
94.
at the Grammys?
In 97, I went as his assistant.
Uh-huh.
So I graduated high school and started college in 94. So by 97, my cousin was singing background with Aretha Franklin. I had met Aretha Franklin, all this stuff. So I knew I wanted to be in entertainment in some way, shape, or form.
And you had these kind of embedded connections.
Somewhat,
I mean,
yes.
well, your cousin,
My
for
cousin,
starters. Go ahead.
who just recently passed away. Her funeral was a couple months ago. Anyway, bless her soul. She was more like an aunt to me.
Was that the woman in her early 60s you were telling me about?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I showed you her picture.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
like 70, early 70s.
Gotcha.
Pardon me. So where was I? So Reggie took me under his wings, and I went with him in 97, and he told me meet him at the Waldorf Astoria. I met him at the Waldorf Astoria.
Just bougie. Go ahead.
And his client was there. So he says, he calls everybody Mary. He says, Mary, this is the room number 6 something. And I was like, okay. So I went, he's like, and ring the bell when you get there. This is before cell phones. There were no text messages. You just, landline, and then you go do it.
Meet me there at this time.
Right. And hear the instructions, and you retain them, or you write yourself a note. And that's what I did. I went to the room. I rang the bell, and here comes Shaka Khan to open the door. I'm like staring there, stunned, like, are you kidding me? And she's like looking at me like, yes, how can I help you? I was like, I'm Reggie Wells' assistant. I'm Reggie Wells' assistant.
I just laugh because I know her through you, obviously. So I'm envisioning this,
This little woman with all this big hair. And I'm like, this is Shaka Khan.
Yeah.
Like, this is at the height of her career, too. So, like, in 94, 97, she's like huge. And so I'm just like, okay. So she's like, well, he's not here yet. Come on in here and go on in there and sit down. And I was like, oh, okay. So I go in, and there's this guy there who's, making her outfit for the evening because she had to go to the Grammys to open the show and present and sing and all that stuff. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like a fish out of water. I'm like every bit of 18 years old.
So he didn't give you any prequel, no prelude, no, this is what's coming. Just be here and ring the doorbell.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So he came a little bit after that. I'm sitting there for about maybe 15 minutes. Then he comes running in, and then, I set up his stuff, and he goes in the back and he does her makeup. And then he comes back. I pack everything up. We leave. We're waiting for our hairstylist to come. He didn't come. And then we wound up going to the Grammys. So we're back then they had stretch limousines. So I don't know if people use those anymore, but everything's SUV now. But anyway, so we're in a stretch limo, and I'm sitting backwards facing her, and she's facing me like we're facing each other now, and I'm riding this way. And so she's talking to me, and she's like looking at me, and she's like, you're really pretty. She was like, you're too pretty to be my nephew, so I'm gonna call you my nephise. Yeah, I had long hair, and I was that big, and I had on this Dolce & Gabbana suit.
So Shorty fell in love with you within minutes.
And so,
That face.
and so how can I retain all of this? This is so crazy that I remember all this. Anyway.
Good. I'm glad. This is the fun part of these conversations.
Yeah, I still have that navy blue suit, that Dolce suit. I can't get one arm in now, but I will again. Anyway, so we're riding, and we get to the awards. So now everybody jumps out. Her publicist is in the car, her manager. They all get out the car, Reggie, and then it's just Shaka and I sitting in the car. And she says, you're going to walk this red carpet with me. And I said, okay. And I'll never forget, I had on these little black glasses with blue. That's when they were wearing the blue tinted lenses. So I get out the car, and she gets out, and there's Shaka. And it's this long red carpet. And back then, the paparazzi was on each side. And there's like this long red carpet to the door. And so we get out, and she gets out, and she says, come on with me. And I jump out with her, and she grabs my arm, and they're like, Shaka. And I got out, and it's like, Prince. It was so hilarious.
People thought you were Prince.
They thought I was Prince. So, which goes to show you how skinny I was at the time. So anyway, they thought I was Prince. And so we walked the red carpet, and thank God she had me under her arms, because the lights flash so much that they are blinding. You can't see what's in front of you. You can't see anything because the flashes.
It's just burning your retina.
You can't see.
Right. Bless you.
Pardon me. Thank you. And because she's so used to that, she just led the way. And the first person I saw as we clear past these lights was Maxwell, because was his first year of being out. And I just remember this big hair and him looking also like a fish out of water. Like, wow, he was amazed at all of the different people, as was I.
Yeah.
You know.
It's the Grammys. I mean, this isn't even the Grammy after party. This is
prior to the Grammys starting. So all the stars, and this is, I mean, guys, we're talking about before social media. These were real stars. You know, Diana Ross is coming in. Whitney Houston was right next to us.
Right.
We shared a dressing.
Right.
We shared a dressing room with all of them.
Oh wow! And I'm picturing, you know, they're lining these stretch limos up so each person could come out and kind of get their moment. Right. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that we remember seeing in movies that were made in the 90s, etc. Okay, so go on.
So we go in. I meet Whitney Houston. I meet Diana Ross. I meet Aretha Franklin.
This is all just when you went to the Waldorf to go meet him, and this all happened in one night.
Absolutely.
Damn.
And so we're in Shaka's dressing room. Her hairdresser had not shown up. This is back when, you know, they had butane curling irons they used to sell in Walgreens, you know, and so she had the Coach was really big back then.
The bag?
Coach bags. And so she had the duffel bag. And so she had a butane curling iron in her duffel bag, and they came, you know, the stage manager came, AD came to say, hey, we need you, you know, they gave the 20-minute call, and her hairstylist still wasn't there. So I wound up having to do her hair. She looks at me and she says, do my hair. She pulls the butane curling iron out of her bag, and I wound up doing her hair. This isn't just, I wound up doing her hair while Diana Ross was in the bathroom and there in the dressing room, put on her gown, evening gown, and I did Shaka's hair, and she looked in the mirror and she said, you're coming with me on the road. You want to come on the road? I said, sure. She says, okay, you're coming with me on the road to do my hair. And I looked at Diana Ross, and she was wearing her hair straight with a purple streak. I don't know why I remember this. It's black strapless dress with the white ruffles and real fitted with a trumpet bottom. Anyway, and she's like, will you fix my hair for me too? And I'm watching her assistant take all her diamonds out. It was just like amazing to see all this. You know, and then Aretha Franklin sitting on the sofa, and Whitney Houston's literally in the room next to us, and we go out in the hall, and she comes out, and she's like, Shaka, they're friends.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was just Lauryn Hill, the Fugees, they were there. It was just all backstage. It was just like, I was just like, wow, no one would ever believe this.
But you didn't go run to like the closest wastebasket and throw up, or you didn't piss yourself. You were totally calm, cool, and collected.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, a girlfriend of mine, Erica Connors, she's a movie producer. She did the movie. The last thing was, well, not the last thing, but one of the most famous was Idlewild, the movie with Outkast. And she and I are dear friends. She worked with John Singleton as well and Hype Williams. And she said to me something back in my 20s when she was working for John Singleton. When I got the job I wound up working with Shaka for some years. Then Patti LaBelle asked me to work with her, and I was just like, this is crazy, Eric. I was working at Warner Brothers because we were off. You know, they would do tours back then, and Shaka was off one tour. We were done with our tour, so she was just enjoying her downtime. And she would go into the studio at that point in time. So we were down, and I needed a gig, and so I would work at Warner Brothers in between, and you know, that's how I wound up doing TV production and learning all that. And so Patti LaBelle offered me a job, and I was just like, oh, I was kind of torn because I was with Shaka, and you know, what one diva to the next. They're all friends now, but you know. So I wound up taking the job, and I was just like, wow, but it's just weird, Erica. Like, I don't feel any kind of way. Going back to your point about the hurling in the trash can, and I didn't feel any kind of way. And she said, that's because, remember this, when you're where you're supposed to be, you don't have any feeling about it. Like, you don't feel like it's, you know, like, wow, because you're where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's comfortable for you. And I remember that. So as I started to transition throughout my career and make changes, I always remembered that. I never really got excited, to be honest with you. I never really got excited. I think the most excitement I had was when I worked with Michael Jordan's wife. That was the first time I probably felt excitement. But it really wasn't, and even then, it really wasn't excitement. It was just kind of like, I got excited after people told me the magnitude of what I was doing. I was like, what? And they're like,
because of how much money he has.
Because of how much money he has. And that's what it always is with people. It's always about the money. And for me, it's never been about the money. It's always been about doing what I love to do. you know, I've never thought, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'll make this kind of money, or if I do that, I make that kind of, I never knew how much money. Back then, people didn't really, I mean, even the career that I had was not something you spoke about. Like, there was no social media, you know, and you didn't tell people, go around telling them, hey, I do Shaka Khan's hair, makeup, and clothes, or I do Patti LaBelle's hair, makeup, and clothes, or I do Juanita George. You just didn't do that. That was
Yeah.
just something that was private.
Right.
You just didn't share that with people, you know.
And again, there wasn't
like-
a platform to share it.
There wasn't, and even when there was one created, I didn't know how to go on and say it. I mean, like, the people I work with were legit. They weren't the housewives, so you just didn't share their business. Back then, you had confidentiality agreements. Everything was confidential. Now everybody tells everything, and I'm still pretty private.
It still should be confidential. That's just
should be.
That's just part of being classy. All right, I'm gonna turn this conversation just a little bit, but before we do that, so your hair and makeup and styling is what you've been doing in your 20s, and I'm assuming a good part of your 30s. But now you're doing something different. Do you want to mention what you do now, or no?
No, I don't mind.
Because you went from doing hair and makeup to now managing her career, which is really cool, I think, because you're able to keep, you know, her kind of the millennials. You're keeping the millennials' attention on her, you know, and even younger. So I just kind of stole that from you. But so that's what you do now.
Yes, I was promoted about 2.5 years ago now to be her manager and business partner. But throughout her career, like, her sister managed her for many years. Then she went through a transitional period for about, you know, 3 to 5 years of trying to find the right person for her, and landed with me. And what we both discovered is that she had been training me from 19 on, you know, now 43. She had really been grooming me all these years
That's an interesting way to look at it.
for this position.
Yeah.
And she nor I knew that.
And
It
she was a Black
never-
Panther, right?
In her day, she was.
Yeah, we
in
were
her
talking about
early
that.
years.
So let's talk a bit about her influence as far as any influence as far as that. I mean, because I don't think she's really militant. I don't want to talk too much about her. This is about you. But
No, I don't mind.
let's segue into like some of that, right? How is that translated? Have you all dealt with prejudice, as you all say, are on the road? You know what I mean? Because I want to move the conversation into, you shared with me some of the, how you translated the protests and how a lot of that stuff affected you. And I want to get to that part of the conversation before we run out of time.
Okay, here's the thing. I think that, yes, prejudice and racism affects all of us. It definitely affects me. It probably affects me more when I'm on my own and people don't know who I am, more so than when I'm with her. She has faced prejudice and racism as well, and I'll let her tell her own story. We will all see that in her biopic and things that are coming out soon that we're working on. But for me, of course, I've experienced it. I experienced it in high school, as I mentioned earlier. Blatantly, I've experienced it in dating. I've experienced it in... I experience it like anybody else does. It's just different when you have the kind of career I have, like, and when you're with celebrity constantly, everything is already kind of, you kind of live in a bubble.
Right.
So
And you're not getting real authentic.
interactions with people.
Right.
Unless it's just me out on my own. But then my life is such that, you know, in Chicago, people tend to know the places I go. Again, it's still kind of somewhat in a bubble. You know, I go from my house into my garage into wherever I'm going. You know,
For the exception of that time that you were on a bike, and I want you to tell that story about COVID, when you
yeah.
rolled into the protests.
right. I rolled into the protest.
And give us some detail, because you and I had some conversations prior to that, and then you kind of went into this, and then you kind of, I think that you had some interactions and dialogue with yourself and came to some new conclusions, right?
Yeah, I mean, I often, yes, it's no mystery that I don't believe that racism is ever going to go away. I've said that, and I still stand by that. I don't believe it. It's just too ingrained in us. It's too ingrained. I mean, and if it does go away, it'll be, I don't know how many hundreds of years. I feel like we're towards the end of the world now, so I don't know.
You feel, is that from what you've learned from religion, or that's just your gut?
A little of both. A little of both. I think the book of Revelation speaks to the times we're living through now.
No way, or is this like the end of the
You
times?
know, I mean, who knows? I don't know, but I know that the book of Revelation speaks about these times that we're in. And, you know, and it's not as bad as it's going to get. But I do believe that when it comes to racism, it's something that's just going to exist. We all have prejudices.
Totally. And that's a big part of this podcast. Go on.
Absolutely. And so many of them are, subconscious racial things or racial prejudices that we're not even aware of.
Right.
So, and that's why I'm saying, and I don't think we necessarily really mean anything by it, but that's just what's ingrained in us.
Do you think that's that behavior is excusable, or do you think it is what it is?
I don't know if we can call it excusable or not. I think it is what it is. Okay. It's just what it is. And I just think that there are differences among people culturally. And it's
because this is where I want to challenge people to make those small changes within themselves. If they can identify what their prejudice or bias is, okay, I'm aware of it. Now let me delve into that, right? Because I have acknowledged some of my own, and I really try to consciously not have those thoughts or move into that space of thought, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think if it's pointed out in conversation, like if you notice something I say that's prejudice and you point it out, then I become more conscious of that the next time I get ready to say it.
Ah, interesting.
Which
a lot of people do. I think I had a guest on before, and she was talking about how she was around a white group of people. Somebody made a black joke, and then she was like, I don't get it. And like put him on blast, and I think she said that she saw that it kind of made him think. That's what
Yeah, I think it's things like that. But I don't know that even in joking, people who are doing it, white people, whoever it is, I don't know if they're necessarily trying to be racist. They just think that that's funny.
Right.
They don't know that that's hurtful.
Right, and that's part of the subconscious.
Which is what's part of the subconscious. So my thing is, there's so much of that I don't know if that's something that can ever be corrected. And again, it's still passed on from generation to generation because somebody's grandfather's still alive. So who grew up in a time where there was segregation.
What do you think about racism within the black community?
What about it?
Let's give it a scale of 1 to 10, or can you equate it to the white experience as far as black people being racist towards white people?
I think black racism is a direct response to having been enslaved.
Interesting.
I don't think that black people, partly because of religion,
There you go.
I don't think that we are innately racist. One of my closest friends, Milo, asked the question of me once before in high school. He said, "Do you think white people are innately racist?" And I said, "I don't think anyone's innately anything. I think that we're taught it, and I believe we're taught that at a young age." Now, I think that black people tend to be racist as a defense mechanism more so than that's just how we are naturally.
Would you bet your life on that?
I would.
Gotcha.
I would.
Yeah.
I definitely would.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I ask that because I think that it's easy to try to identify what's going on with us as far as, A to B, right? What might be some racial issues we have, but trying to figure out where they come from or connect to how, where that begins and the inception of that is it's a lot of work.
And I would even say, even within our community, we have so many inter-prejudices. You're lighter than I am, so, you think you're better than me. All of that kind of stuff. These, what do you call it, insecurities that many of us tend to have. Yeah. Some of us who are color struck, it's just, and it all stems from black culture in America. We don't know what our culture is. We don't. What is the black culture? What is our history? As black Americans, what is it? I don't hear my white friends saying, "Oh, she's lighter than you," or "He's more peach than I am," or whatever, or "They can't come over here." I'll never forget in high school when I was at the Arts Academy, when we were dealing with racism, they had all of us, the entire school, because there weren't that many of us at the school. It was ridiculously expensive. We couldn't afford it, which is also why I was out of there after the first year. It was like $7,500 a year anyway, which was a lot of money then.
Yeah.
They broke us up into groups, you know, those, you know, men on this side, women on this side, black men on this side, black women on this side, black men with brown eyes on this side, black men who are biracial kids, interracial kids here, interracial who are Irish here, interracial who are German and something else there. I mean, those who have blue eyes there, those who have green eyes there. I mean, they broke it down to the point that there were only like 2 or 3 of us, sometimes one of us in a group. And they said, if you're going to be racist and prejudiced, these are the only people you can speak to in your group. It was the most, I mean, eye-opening experience
So,
for me.
right, and it was a learning experience.
It was a learning experience.
This
to
is
me.
an exercise.
Exactly.
Wow.
Which to me kind of breaks down even within our racial construct, there's still differences among us. You know, so
We were just talking about this earlier this afternoon.
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
People are going to inherently try to, press somebody down.
Mm-hmm.
Classism, very much there.
Exactly. Because what happens when the rich black man is in the room with the poor white man and he says you whatever, but okay, I'm going to leave here and you're going to go back to your neighborhood and I'm going to leave and I'm going to go with the people you want to be around because
Yeah.
they're my neighbors.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's just...
And I mean, I hate to be so blunt and be so curt with that part of the conversation. I just know that, like, again, your upbringing, kind of being on the more affluent side, being in a school that was obviously predominantly is an understatement as far as, how many white folks attended. And just, we all have our different experiences and perspective on what racism looks like and how it feels. Across the board, it's shitty, right? But I think that you experienced more racism than I would have imagined you would have. But it's nice that you have this bubble. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll never forget one time I was at a club. This was within like the last 10 years. I dated this guy. He was a pilot, white guy. And he, Greg, and I'll never forget, I had gone out to meet, hi, Greg. I had gone out with him to meet some friends of his. We weren't dating at the time. I had met him out. Or were we? I can't remember. Anyway, long and short of the story is I met him out and a group of his friends, like maybe 3 or 4 of them, we were all out. We had been in the bar. We were speaking, talking, all that. And they were all, kind of like, okay, until we got outside. And when we got outside, I had a brand new BMW, black, tinted windows, very flashy car, very expensive car. And he was staring at the car and I just continued my conversation. I didn't say anything. And it wasn't until I got ready to leave and I said, okay, guys, well, I'll see you later. And then the valet gave me my keys and he hit the thing and gave me my keys. And one of the guys says, whose car is this? Is this your car? And I said, yes, it's my car. And he says, oh, and you can literally see on his face that he wished he had been more invested in the conversation the evening because he was a little distant.
So then once he saw that you had something, a little bit of regret was there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was so, and I was just like, wow. So much so that Greg even mentioned it to me when I left. And he was just like, wow. He was like, did you see, I can't remember the guy's name. But I was just like, yeah, it's so interesting. You noticed too.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And I'm sure you have, as we all do, several examples of that. I mean, even with me, with, my partnership or ownership in small business, I mean, people, oh, you own this place? You? Like, yeah, me. Or you drive this car? Yeah. Or even when people will just drive by you and look at you funny in your car. Like, yes, black people can have nice shit too.
Yeah.
All right, so we've kind of moved the format around a little bit, and again, I think that was inevitable because of our relationship. But tell me a bit about. I want to get to the part of, as far as solution is concerned, right? As far as hope is, you said, Armageddon's on the way, the end of the world's almost here. That's scary stuff. I mean, do you really believe that? Do you think that there is some? What side of the coin are you on with that?
Well,
are you hopeful? If you had kids, would you be worried?
I will say, going back to the question you asked earlier, a few minutes ago, which is, when I got on my bicycle and I rode around the neighborhood. First of all, when all this started, COVID, a lot of that, I kind of went through a lightweight depression on my own. I was used to traveling constantly and being gone and this and the other. And here I was, didn't even know, all the riots were going on. I had no idea because I had not turned on my television in months. So I was reading a lot and just being with myself a lot, meditation. So I got on my bike and I went for a ride. And literally there were all these cars out on the street. I didn't know what was going on. And I literally pulled over. I called a friend and I found out, oh my gosh, the protest. And that's when I got up. I became abreast on what was going on. And I literally was moved to tears. And I was moved to tears because I saw so many young, and when I say young, I mean in their 20s and their teens, young kids and people from all walks of life, all different cultures, fighting for Black Lives Matter. And it just moved me to tears because in my day, that never would have happened. We had the Million Man March, which was predominantly black. It was all black men in DC. I was in college then and did it, And so I was just like, wow, this is really interesting. And I was moved to tears. So when it comes to solutions, is there hope? I believe there is hope. I just wish that the country wasn't run by old white men, because unfortunately that's what keeps us from moving forward to me.
Yeah.
Politics has a tendency to hold us back. And as long as there are politics and the old regime of people are in place, we're going to continue to have their agenda pushed, which is divide and conquer.
And greed.
And so I believe until that shifts and changes, there's not going to be, I think it's just kind of going to be what it is. Hope. Do I believe that the world's coming to an end? I do. I believe all things come to an end. Just like people die all the time. Why would we not all die? It makes sense. Am I afraid, did you ask?
No. I mean, I wanted to get, both sides of the coin on that one. And again, kind of like, do you really actually believe that the end of the world is coming? And
yes.
And then on the other side of that coin, can you be hopeful for the future, generally speaking, pulling racism or prejudice out of it, just with the times that we're living in, COVID, living in a pandemic, seeing this has all been new. This is a first for everybody, unless you're over 80. You know what I mean? Spanish flu for some folks in Europe, but you know what I mean? It's like
they would have to be 98 because that was in 1922.
There you go. That's why I went with 80 because I knew that I was safe with that number because my math wasn't that quick.
Actually, they would have to 102. I'm sorry.
Okay, look. Okay, now you're just boasting. Okay, we get it. No, I'm just kidding. But all right. So this is my last question for you. Okay.
Okay.
And it ties in with what we just spoke about. So I know how you feel about the end of the world, but it's just a lot of this I think is just because of what you've learned, right?
It's what I learned, but I mean, everybody's fighting everywhere. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. But let's talk. I want you to focus a little more on the hopeful side.
Okay.
Can you? Give me a minute on that.
I mean, I live in hope every day. Every day that we get up is an opportunity. I mean, every day.
What keeps you in
hope.
that space? What do you do to keep yourself in that space? Because you are a happy person by nature. How come these realities don't scare you if it is the end of the world?
Because I live my life fully every single day of it. And whenever it ends, it ends. I'm not one of those people saying, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. I do every goddamn thing I want to do every day. I don't have any regrets. I don't. And I thank God that my life is what it's been because I have lived without regrets. I really have. The only regret I have is that I wish I had been more in tune with love, meaning not agape love because I've embraced that well, but romantic love. That's the one thing I have not focused on in my life because career and everybody else and their needs have always been more important to me. And I've been fulfilled in that, if you will. I have no regrets about any of those things. But yeah, I mean, everything, I live my life fully already. And you know what? When it's over, it's over. That's it. I don't live in fear. I don't live with worry. I live every day. And that's it. When it's over, it's over.
If you were to give the listeners and viewers one kind of action, one kind of solution that can keep them in a space of hope, what would that be?
do what you love to do every day. Because if you do what you love, there will be no animosity anywhere in your heart. You will be able to forgive a little more easier.
What if you work at a bank? How do you know? What if you don't know what it is that you love to do?
Then you should try and figure out what it is you love to do. You know, we spend time doing other things. We spend time drinking and partying, and don't make any excuse for that. So my thing is, if you really want to get in touch with what you love to do, you will, just like you do anything else. Just do it. Just do it.
Just do it. You heard it first. That's so newsy. I like that. Just do it. We're an hour on the nose. Look at us.
All right.
Just consummate professionals. So again, I was looking forward to this. Obviously, now viewers and listeners know why, right? It was just, you got a lot to offer. We'll get you back on the show. Always, follow us, please, and like us on all social media platforms. That's important so that you can be aware or alerted when we are going to bring you some new content. Again, a big thanks to George Robert Fuller. Find him on also, again, all social media platforms. What's your website?
www.chakakhan.com. CHAKHAN.com.
You're funny. Don't forget the www.
That's so dated, right? No one says that. That's see how much I don't even do this kind of stuff. I know,
but it's funny because
ChakaKhan.com.
I had to make a joke of it. No, I had to make a joke of it
because he calls me old all the time.
Whatever. I still have an AOL email.
Do you?
I do. I mean, I have like 4 other Gmails and a couple of other accounts, but I still actually have an AOL account. Anyway, Now we're rambling. We're going to go back to visiting. We are again coming to you from Venice Beach, California. Love yourselves. Love on each other. We love you. That's a wrap for us. We'll see you soon.